Welcome to part 4 of our trip to Virginia. In this video, we visit and tour Monticello, the home of Thomas Jefferson, the third president of the United States. But before we get started, let's do a quick recap of our first 3 videos of this trip. We started out by visiting Chincoteague and Assateague Islands in Virginia, relaxing and embracing island life. We also took a boat tour to get up close to some of the wild pony herds that live on Assateague Island. After our time on the islands, we headed out for Charlottesville. Wanting to avoid the extra drive inland around the mountain, we decided to pull our camper through the tunnels that go underneath the Chesapeake Bay. It was a new experience for us, and it was both exciting and nerve-wracking at the same time. If you missed those 3 videos, check out the links above. We recommend watching them first and then join us back here.
It does not fit this wall. It is the calendar clock as well as the outdoor clock that we saw, and it's operated by gravity and weights. The weights are cannonballs at the ends of these pulleys. Every Sunday, they start up at the top. As the clock is wound, there are the holes at 4 o'clock and 8 o'clock. This is Saturday, so the cannonballs are already down in the cellars because it did not fit. We're going to see them when we go downstairs. Anybody remember why? 1803, Louisiana Territory is purchased. Doubles the size of our country, 800,000 acres added. Thomas Jefferson has always been interested in the West, and he sends out an expedition with 2 very famous men. Portrait of his daughter, also painted by Thomas. Yep. So this suite of rooms, Thomas Jefferson referred to as his most private suite, his sanctus sanctorum. Originally, that room, this room, and this room were part of his book room. Today we would call that a library. It's copied from the home that he had in France. And it's a suite of rooms with a book room, his cabinet, and his bedchamber. It does create a very private area, and people wrote that very few were invited in here. And they were sort of miffed because they wanted to borrow from his extensive library. But his library was reduced in 1815 when Thomas Jefferson was in another period of debt. We're going to be talking about that several times today. He has to pay off a $25,000 debt, so he sells 6,500 books for about $25,000. He pays off the debt, but then he says, I cannot live without books. And he buys 1,100 more. And they only filled this space here, so his daughter was able to acquire that room. By the way, she was highly educated. She accompanied her father to France, ages 12 to 17. She attended a convent school, considered one of the most highly educated women of her time period. And he also called for the abolition of slavery in an early draft, but it was not received well by the rest of the group, and it would be a conflict for Thomas Jefferson all of his life. He thought slavery was an abomination, and he thought the slaves should be freed. But he had different views on race, and also he believed that African Americans were inferior, but he also believed that perhaps sending them back to Africa would be the answer. He toyed with a number of ideas, but he himself never could make any of that happen, and he certainly would have liked to have freed the slaves, but he didn't know he couldn't really because of the lifestyle he created for himself. Come on in and maybe get closer to the furniture there so you can have a good look. So those of you in this room already are probably noticing this room is a little brighter. This is one of 12 skylights throughout the house. This is coming in with the second phase of Monticello. This portion of the house would be that. First of all, we had a little discussion earlier about height. How tall was Thomas Jefferson? Anybody know? 6 foot. 6'2½". Any gentlemen here 6'2½"? Okay, you're about Thomas Jefferson's size. Are you gonna fit in that bed?
No.
It's actually 6'3". It's an optical illusion. But oh, that's another tour.
Yeah.
So coming in, folks, I want you to watch how I close these doors. With one hand,
Oh.
yes, the automatic doors. How does it work? Underneath these parquet floors, they're beech and cherry, is a chain like a bicycle chain with a twist on the end. It's the original chain. It still works today.
Oh, wow.
Same with the doors in the house to West Lawn.
They don't make stuff like that.
No, they don't. So we're now in the parlor. That first room, most uninvited guests would never get past that room. This room is used by the family and visitors, a place to congregate for conversation, entertainment, special events, weddings, baptisms. And Thomas Jefferson, though, is doing the same thing. He once said knowledge is power, knowledge is safety, knowledge is happiness. And so he's giving his family and his friends a chance to learn something while they are congregating in this room. First thing that might get their attention is one of the 63 paintings he brought back from France, Salome bearing the head of John the Baptist, perhaps reminding people of his position on the separation of church and state. If you go back to the biblical story, you'll understand that. But he also thought that religion was between you and yourself, that it was not something to be imposed on anyone else. And he made his own Bible. He took out the parts he liked. In a standard Bible, it is now this thick, the Jefferson Bible, no miracles, thank you. And that's Benjamin Franklin, and we have that portrait commissioned as he succeeded him as the minister to France. But pause for a moment in this corner. Music, Thomas Jefferson once said, was the passion of his soul. He and his wife met over music. He himself was an accomplished violinist. His wife, daughters, and granddaughters all played keyboard instruments. Now,
Is this a piano or harpsichord?
the harpsichord, yes. And while Thomas Jefferson was in France and his second daughter was brought over to him, she was accompanied by a young enslaved woman named Sally Hemings. We believe that Thomas Jefferson and Sally Hemings began their relationship in France probably in the last year that they were all in France together. The National Portrait Gallery, it rotates every 3 years. We're in our 3rd year, you get to see it here. The blank spot would be for James Madison when we find an appropriate portrait. The 5th is not James Monroe, our 5th president. Do you recognize that gentleman? It's the Marquis de Lafayette, who paid a visit here in 1824. They were great friends after Thomas Jefferson's time in France. It is said that at the end of the visit, Thomas Jefferson wrote in his journal that he was completely captured on both sides of the
That would tend to keep us young, though, wouldn't it?
Everybody wants one of those. He was importing wine from the time he lived in France by the barrel, and it was bottled here in the room down below. And then whatever the signal was, we don't know what it was, it would be rolled over to someone in the cellars waiting for the signal for when it was time up. First color, if you all were here some years ago, that was blue was the color of this room at that time. Probably introduced by the person who bought the house in 1834. Thomas Jefferson died $107,000 in debt. His family was forced to have a sale. We'll talk about that a little bit later, but also in 1834, the house was sold to Commodore rvliving. He was the first Jewish Commodore in the U.S. Navy who thought it was important to preserve this house. And we can credit him and his family for the next 90 years for preserving this house. So in 1923, when the foundation took over, we were able to see the house. again, we have the granite floor. We do have it covered with vinyl, but along the edges, you can see that this floor, as well as the first room that we were in, were painted green, and that was suggested by the painter Gilbert Stewart in order to bring the outside in. And speaking of the outside, this room has been written about by historians as Thomas Jefferson's conceit, because we had no idea when he actually planned for this room, which is unusual because every room he designed had a purpose. This one is all about what it looks like on the outside, I believe. It's the whole effect. We do know that the room was used for overflow sleeping, storage, and that oldest grandson, Jeff, this was a little apartment for him and his bride the first year they were married in 1815. I want you to look at that room and tell me what's missing. That's a room used by the granddaughters. Does not have an alcove bed because the closet for Thomas Jefferson is on the other side of that wall. He brought his bride there in 1772. She dies 10 years later. We don't have any evidence that she actually lived in any part of the original house. Probably, but they would have been originally part of that time.
So extending here below us is the main vegetable garden here at Monticello. It runs parallel to Mulberry Row, so it is also about 1,000 feet in length. So again, it's the size of roughly 3 football fields, and it's inside this vegetable garden where enslaved gardeners like Warmly Hughes and Tom Shackelford, they cultivated hundreds of varieties of fruits and vegetables from around the world. They then transported that produce from this vegetable garden into the kitchens that were located underneath the wall. Inside those kitchens, enslaved chefs like James Hemings, Peter Hemings, Francis Hearn, and Edith Edith Fawcett was the head enslaved chef here at Monticello the last 17 years of Thomas Jefferson's life. And if we look closer at that description of her cuisine, half French, half Virginian, the half French side of her cooking, this came from Fawcett's training as a French chef. When she was about 15 years old, she was separated from her family here at Monticello, taken to Washington, D.C. to be trained by some of the top chefs in that city how to prepare foods in this French style. Mulberry Row is named for the mulberry trees that line either side of it. Jefferson attempted to establish a silkworm plantation here at Monticello, so initially these were fruiting mulberries. That was not a successful venture. We mentioned early on in our tour that there were 200 years ago about 20 buildings that lined either side of Mulberry Row. Most of those buildings no longer stand today. The building that was originally located inside the spot that we're currently at, it's marked by the wooden posts, was the site of the blacksmith and nailery shops. So this was one large structure. The blacksmith shop was here on the right-hand side. This is where Joseph Fawcett labored as an enslaved blacksmith. The nailery was here on the right-hand side, left-hand side of the structure. My right, y'all's left. Labor here at Monticello, it was divided based on gender. When enslaved children reached the age of 10, enslaved girls labored inside the textile shop weaving fabrics. Enslaved boys labored here inside the nailery forging nails. If you've taken any other tours here at Monticello or explored some of the exhibits, that name might sound familiar. James Hemings was an enslaved chef here at Monticello who traveled to France to learn the art of French cooking during Jefferson's ambassadorship. We are going to be looking at the story of a different James Hemings. So both related, different people. The James Hemings that we are going to be talking about was the younger of the two. The younger James Hemings, he labored inside this nailery for several years and one day became incredibly sick. He was so sick that he wasn't able to work for several days. The overseer for the nailery, a white man named Gabriel Lilly didn't think that James Hemings was actually sick. He thought that James Hemings was feigning his illness. Because of this, Gabriel Lilly proceeded to whip James Hemings 3 times in one single day, to the point where James Hemings could no longer raise his hand to his head to ward off the blows. A white craftsman here at Monticello named James Oldham heard about this, wrote a letter to the then President Thomas Jefferson detailing what had happened. And in this letter, as James Oldham described what had happened, he referred to it as an act most barbaric and cruel. Jefferson later responded by saying he believed that Gabriel Lilly was quick with the whip. But Jefferson said, and I quote, "No one fulfills my purposes better." What does that tell us about life for enslaved people here at Monticello?
What do you call Jefferson died?
Jefferson died of natural causes. He was sick the last few weeks of his life. And died in 1826. He only freed 5 people in his will. We talked about Joseph Fawcett a little bit. 2 of the other people that Jefferson freed in his will, so 2 of the 5, were his youngest 2 surviving children, was Sally Hemings. Sally Hemings was an enslaved woman here at Monticello, member of the Hemings family, one of the largest families to live here at Monticello, whether free or enslaved. Sally Hemings had at least 6 children who were fathered by Thomas Jefferson. 4 survived into adulthood, 3 sons and 1 daughter, named Beverly, Harriet, Madison, and Eston Hemings. Sally Hemings raised her children inside one of the rooms underneath the terrace of the house, next to the kitchens. And inside that exhibit today is about a 5-minute audio-visual exhibit telling more of Sally Hemings' story. Her youngest surviving child, Eston Hemings, he, along with his brother Madison Hemings and brother Beverly Hemings, they labored inside the joiner shop here, which is outlined by the stone foundation, learning the skill of carpentry and joinery from their uncle, John Hemings, who was one of the enslaved joiners and carpenters here at Monticello, who did a lot of the woodworking inside the main house. Eston Hemings, upon his freedom, moved to the city of Charlottesville, married a woman named Julia, and began a family. Following his mother's death in 1835, Eston Hemings and his wife decided to move their family to Ohio. In Ohio, they lived there for several years before eventually deciding to move to Wisconsin. When they got to Wisconsin, Eston and Julia Hemings dropped the last name Hemings, took the last name Jefferson, assumed white identities, and passed into white society. One of their descendants later reflected on why her ancestors might have made this decision to pass into white society, and she said that her ancestors, Julia and Eston Hemings, likely saw that their children were smart and intelligent and should have the exact same opportunities that white people did. Because even though they moved to Ohio, where slavery was no longer legal, the racism used to support the institution of slavery still existed.
want to circle back to Thomas Jefferson and his ideal of all men are created equal, but yet he was a slave owner. There was a building that I went into there on the grounds of Monticello, and another lady that was from our same group was in there, and she brought up, she goes, so was it all fake? Was it all wrong about our forefathers saying one thing but yet doing another? And she was referring to that concept of all men created equal but being a slave owner. And it made me think also of contemporaries of that time period, including Henry Clay. So I said to her, I guess what it means is that we need to distinguish between the idea and the person, the man. And the man is stuck sort of in limbo between a forward-thinking idea of a goal that the country should move towards, but yet he's stuck in the present reality of his own finances, his own home, his own ability to even operate as a statesman, etc., because of the fact that he owned slaves. But yet he could see the day coming when that issue had to be dealt with. He was just not able to or willing to deal with it immediately in his lifetime. And so I told her it behooves every generation to take the idea and forward it and advance it the best that they can to their abilities. And eventually, generation after generation after generation, we can get to that ideal that was mentioned in the Constitution about all men created equal. And, that also includes women, and not just counting somebody as a gentleman because they are an owner of something, but it's every person. So just wanted to give that some more comment, because it is wonderful that we have a Constitution that we do, and the ideals and the ideas that were presented back then. We're still working on that today. Different points in history, there were milestones. Women got the right to vote. Black people got freedom and then the right to vote, etc. So I think it's very important that we don't get stuck in the past, but that we keep moving forwards, that we extend the hand of brotherhood to those around us, so that we can prayerfully take those ideals forward into our next generation.
If you had watched the first video in this travel series, you may recall me mentioning how Harry and I had made some new friends at a Grand Design National Owners Rally, and this couple has a Sheltie, and his name is Cody. Their dog Cody and our dog Bailey hit it off and became best friends at the rally and played a lot together. So today we are getting ready to go over to our friend's home, spend the day with them. We are taking our dogs so that Cody and Bailey can reunite and have a good time playing together.
Ladies and gentlemen, please take your seats. The show is about to begin.
Thank you for watching part 4 of our trip to Virginia. Please remember to subscribe to our channel. It's free to do, and it really helps our channel to grow. If you liked this video, please give it a thumbs up and leave us some comments below. Until we see you next time, remember to be genuine with your love, be present with those in your life, and live each day with grace.